of the things you want to focus on.
It really is all about the affordability and the economy, growing the economy. That's it. As far as I'm concerned, one would address the other, and I think that's something that we've lacked focus on, and something we need to restore. So that's it in a nutshell. Something that I've advocated for the last number of years. Started with my Vermont Everyday Jobs tour, where I go out and work a day in someone else's shoes, and what I've found is that people are employees and employers are both struggling in many different aspects, and I think that what the employees are feeling, they're working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet, trying to pay their property taxes, make their mortgage payments, their rent payments, and so forth, and not able to make that happen. So when you look at what the problem is, it's been well documented, but we have this population that's stagnant, 620 something thousand people, and what we really need to do, and we're losing this category, this age group from 25 to 45, and we've lost 30,000 people out of that category alone since the last census. And when you think about what that represents, that's the workforce, and those are the folks that they buy homes, have families, utilize services, buy products. And if they're not doing that, if they're not there, that's 5% of our population. If they're not there, then it puts the burden on the rest of us that are. So there's less people working than there were 7 years ago. The workforce has shrunk. So we better pay attention to that demographic, that 25 to 45, to lessen the burden on the rest of us, and to lessen the affordability crunch that we're feeling, and to try and emphasize the economy is something. Growing the economy, bringing revenue in rather organically, instead of raising taxes and fees, is the only approach we have left. Well, first thing you have to do is you have to get your own fiscal house in order, and that means living within your means. And I have to do it in my business. I've been in business for most of my life in different ways, and in my personal life. You have to make choices. You have to prioritize. You can't spend more than you're taking in. And what this legislature has done over the last 6 or 7 years is present budgets that grow faster than the economy does, and that just leads to more taxation, more fees being raised, and that again furthers this crisis of affordability that we have in Vermont. So first thing, you have to develop a budget that is in line with the rise of the cost of living. That's what you have to do first of all. And I've advocated for looking back a year, taking a look at what the economy grows and what wages grow, and then if it's 1%, your budget grows 1%. It doesn't, or caps at a 1% growth. If it grows at 2%, you cap it at 2% growth. You just don't go further than that. And you get asked at that point, what are you going to cut? Well, it's as much about prioritization. You have to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. Public safety is very important, but you prioritize that, just like we have to do in our own lives, just like we have to do in our own businesses. And you make difficult choices, but that's what you have to do first. The other is I would put a modernization team together to take a look at the efficiencies in government. There's so many areas where we could do better, but it's going to take, again, focusing on that. Different aspects of how we deliver government services. It's amazing what the levels of bureaucracy that have been built over the last couple of decades, and they're ideas that people have. They want to further areas of growth, and so that means another level of bureaucracy. And so when that happens, there's overlap, then there's silos, and people aren't connecting with one another. We could deliver, I believe, we could deliver oversight and develop a much more efficient way of doing business in all different departments. So that'd be the other aspect. That's what I would do, set up a modernization team as well. But then really focus on pro-growth bills, trying to work with the legislature. You have to work with the legislature. That's something that I think is necessary. You're not going to all of a sudden be elected and then have the magic wand at the throne and determine what's going to be done. You have to get to work and build consensus so that you can have some buy-in from others. You have to first admit that you have a problem, and I think that that's something that has been missing as well. There's been many well-intentioned people in the legislature that just don't have a clue as to what is happening in Vermont. And I think that that's the first thing, is establish that we have a problem, and then what do we do about it? How do we pull together? How do we pull in the same direction in order to satisfy all? Because a thriving economy is going to lift all boats. And so if we can address this issue first, and again, get on the same page, and dedicate the next 4 years of the legislative process to growing the economy, I'm confident that we can work our way out of this. But it's going to take all hands on deck, everyone pulling in the same direction. I've been in business for a long time, and what I look for is some certainty. And we provided anything but over the last 6 or 7 years. Start from the beginning. Start with the single-payer health care provision. And I had said in the beginning that I'm open-minded. Show me how this will work. Show me who's going to pay for it, how much it's going to cost. And the advocates kept saying, this is our only approach. And I kept reiterating, show us how much this is going to cost, who's going to pay for it, and how it works. And they were never able to do it, but it was prolonged over 6 or 7 years. 6 or 7 years of uncertainty about what this was going to mean for Vermont businesses. So when I'm, as a business owner, as somebody that develops and grows my business, when I start hearing about possibly a 15, 16, 17% payroll tax, I'm not sure what that's going to mean to me. Mm-hmm. And what I do at that point is I sit on my hands. Mm-hmm. I don't do anything. I hunker down because I'm not sure, with all the unpredictability, uncertainty, and what the government's going to do to me. What tax and are they going to impose on me next? That leads me to not want to grow. So I think, first of all, providing some certainty, changing the culture of government is also really, really important. I have a friend of mine is in the grain store, hardware store business, and he called, it was maybe a year ago, and he had just gone through a sales tax audit, and he was remarking about the number of hours. I think he said there was 240 hours that they came in to audit him, and they found about $17,000 worth of penalties and so forth, unpaid sales taxes and so forth that he was on the hook for. And his frustration was first one of the items that they found was that he wasn't taxing gloves, and he said it's clothing. And they said, well, no, it's work related. So if it's work related, it's tax. It's very subjective. So he didn't know that. So his first thought was, why, other than playing the I gotcha routine where they come in and tell you all the things that you're doing wrong, his remark was, why don't they come in and spend about 40 hours here telling me what I'm supposed to do? I'm not trying to circumvent the tax laws. He said, I'm trying to be a good citizen, a good corporate citizen. I'm trying to do everything right, but if I don't know, how am I going to do that? So changing the culture of government is really important to me. Being more of a helping hand to businesses, trying to work together, because in the end, a healthy business that's collecting taxes appropriately is going to benefit the state of Vermont. Our businesses are our agents. They're our lifeblood. We need them to be healthy. We need them to work together with us in order to have a better, more prosperous Vermont. So again, changing the culture is creating certainty, and then having, again, we've tried over the number of years, but haven't been in the majority of trying to focus on the economy. 2 years ago, there was in that biennium, there was 1,200 and something bills were introduced in the legislative biennium. Out of the 1,200 plus bills, there was about 30 of them, we went through every one, 30 of them that would have had a positive effect on the economy. And out of the 30, about 3 passed. And when I take a look at the session that just ended, I can't for the life of me find one single bill that had any meat to it, had anything that would have helped us in any meaningful way in terms of the economy. So that tells me we're not focusing on the right things. We're not focusing on areas where we can help ourselves and become more self-sufficient. But again, as a business owner, I'm looking for somebody to either stay out of my way or be a helping hand to me, and trying to grow my business. It's a very expensive state to live in. We have less people working than we did 7 years ago. That tells me that the workforce is shrinking. The unemployment rate is great. You know, the 3 point whatever percent unemployment rate, that's wonderful. But I look at the net. You know, when somebody talks about their gross and sales and so forth, that's fine. That's one way of measuring something, but it's really about the net. What did you get to keep? And it's the same with jobs. I mean, it's nice having a low unemployment rate, but tell me what the net is. You know, if there's less people working, then that's the part. That's what we need to focus on: employment, not unemployment, and that's the key figure. Because the more who are employed, the more we're putting back into the system. We're in taxes and in utilization of services, utilization of buying products, and so forth. It's the way the economy works. We can't underestimate consumer confidence either. When they feel good about the economy, they're spending money, and it's the same with businesses. They feel good about the economy and government and so forth and steadiness. They tend to spend more money. They tend to grow. And again, that's the part I think that is missing at this point in time. We have a captured market right here. When you think about the number of graduates from our colleges and universities right here in the state, about 10,000 a year that we have here. We need to capture them. They come here for a reason. They want to be here. They like Vermont. That's half the battle. They accept it, embrace it in some respects. But what they want is they want opportunity, and they want to be able to afford to stay here. So if we could provide incentivize in some fashion them staying in Vermont, providing that there's opportunity for them, a job for them here, I think again that's goes a long ways. I was at a young professionals event in Rutland a year ago or so, and they talked about just this. What is it that would keep you here? And there's a lot of ideas that came across. One of them was maybe no income tax for those under 28. Now, I don't know what that will cost. I don't know if it'll be effective, but it's an interesting concept. Maybe let them get on their feet, pay some of their student debt, get established, create a foundation, finally have opportunities. Maybe that would be enough to get them to think about Vermont as being their home. So I was at a Chamber of Commerce event in Randolph, and we talked about this subject, about what is it? You know, you go around the room and you ask, you know, how many of your kids have left the state, and you see an awful lot of hands go up. I raised my hand because of opportunity. And I know we're not just talking about keeping Vermont kids here, but attracting anybody here. But the point was, we were talking about what are the ways we can keep our youth here, that working class, that demographic. And there was a doc that was there at the event, and I could see him writing things down. And he wrote for maybe 5 or 10 minutes while we were talking. And he raised his hand and he said, I'll tell you what will keep them here. And he had a prescription written right then. And he had 5 or 6 initiatives. In 5 minutes, he came up with 5 or 6 initiatives. Can you imagine if we dedicated the legislative session to growing the economy, that every single committee could have a piece of this? The Finance Committee, Ways and Means, could have ways of creating tax incentives and so forth for businesses to grow and prosper. You might have the Transportation Committee dealing with infrastructure. You could have the Natural Resources Committee dealing with different ways to streamline the permit process or make it more viable and more easier to work your way through, meander your way through. Every single committee, education, could develop some public-private partnerships and making sure that we're aligning our education system to what jobs are available here in the state. I think there's, you look at different universities and colleges, and I give Dave Walk a lot of credit at Castleton, because he's realizing that now, and he's established a pretty good program for internships. We need more of that. We're too small a state not to talk with one another. So VTC, I think, with a new change of leadership, I think that might be beneficial. Having somebody, Pat Moulton, assuming the helm of VTC, with her background and the economy and economic development, maybe this is ways we can help each other in that respect. So I think we have a captured audience of 10,000. We have to just figure out ways that they incentivize for them to stay. Housing is going to be a big part of that as well. I think that I believe we do a fairly decent job in creating low-income housing. I think we do a terrible job in creating housing for our working class. And there's a disconnect there. So we need to, again, focus on that. And I think that there are opportunities there as well. When you look at the growth of, like, say, the solar industry, I think this, whether you like it or don't like it, is immaterial. The point is that it's expanded tremendously over the last few years because of tax incentives. So tax incentives work. So we need to make sure, if we're trying to grow businesses, if we're trying to grow, maybe it's housing, affordable housing, that we focus on that and create some incentives for our developers to do something to help. I think a lot of it is in our downtowns, actually. I think that there certainly could be with the right elected officials, but as I've seen before, the governor has a lot of power in setting the tone and the agenda, and trying to work with those in the legislature, I think is important. Something that I've done successfully in trying to build consensus, work together, trying to become public servants after we're elected instead of politicians. I think that's important. So you need to have that respect. You need to work with others, and I think that that's the only way you're going to accomplish anything legislatively. And you could spend your next 2 years just fighting with the legislature, or vice versa, but that doesn't get anything done. I'd rather see what we can do that binds us together. We have common goals, and I believe it can be done. The answers are literally in our hands. We're too small a state. We can make this work, but we're going to, again, I can't reiterate enough, we're going to have to work together in order for this to be accomplished. I mean, everything is, again, difficult. These are difficult discussions to have, but I remember the reason I chuckled a bit was because I remember, was it last year, the year before, where it went through the legislative session. They were down to the bare bones, couldn't make any more cuts. That was it. There was no more area, there's no place they could move to. And it was, the legislature adjourned. It was probably a month later, and they received the news about a downgrade in revenues up to the tune of $30 million. Well, they found $30 million to cut. So that doesn't tell me that there's no fat. That tells me that there are other opportunities, and I would venture to say it's going to happen again during this time. We'll see. I haven't received any notification of this at this point in time, but my guess is revenues are going down, and there's going to be a problem in the next budgetary cycle, and there may be another move to cut. So again, we heard the same thing this past session. We have to raise taxes and fees. There's no areas to cut. Well, we'll see. So I would say there's always opportunities. I mean, they're not easy choices. I look at things sometimes in simplistic terms in my own life and in my own business, and I have to classify. I ask myself a kind of a basic question: want and need. Do I want it, or do I need it? And sometimes I don't like the answer that I receive, because those things that I tend to want, I think I need, but I don't. So I think that's a fairly basic question, and we have to ask ourselves that same question in government. There's things that we have to take care of, but then the others, we have to make tough choices. So, but Medicaid is a prime example of a third of our budget is spent on Medicaid. A third of our population is somehow enrolled in the Medicaid program. And again, from my standpoint, and the administrative costs of Medicaid have risen about $100 billion over the last 6 or 7 years. So that would be a big question to ask yourself, or that's one question I'll be asking: why? That's an increase that is unsustainable. It's not something. When you look at the administrative costs of Medicaid, they far exceed any of the other, like Blue Cross Blue Shield or any other entities of typically the same. So we have to look at for opportunities to do things in a much more efficient way in the delivery of just the administration of Medicaid. Because again, if we could cut that growth by half, that'd be enough, right there in that one area. So I'd be looking for opportunities to do things differently, and without reducing the services needed.
How about Vermont Health Connect? What's going to happen with that if you're like?
We have to transition to something else. It's as simple as that. I know it was reported. It seemed like it was just reported that I had said that I don't remember the term, but I wasn't clear about what should be done, and I think I was clear. We need to transition to something else, whether it is going to the federal health exchange or federal exchange, or working with another state in some way. And it's been well documented. I've talked with Connecticut for quite some time. They have a system that does work. They'd be willing to work with us to let us utilize their structure. In fact, what's interesting about it is that the Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut is in charge of their system, but the brains behind it is a guy named Jim Wadley, who grew up in Essex Junction. His parents still live there. He went to UVM, moved to Connecticut. So he has a vested interest, and he thinks it could work. They help Maryland with their system, and it's cloud-based, so we could just use their structure, not using the same, not joining their exchange, but utilizing their structure that works for our exchange.